is famous. And so Scott Boras saw this as an opportunity to change the slotting structure of the draft and really have a crusade here to raise the prices that high school and college players got. And so there was a real pitched battle down to the last 77 seconds, and there was a compromise reached. This was the biggest contract by almost 50% that an amateur player ever got. On the other hand, it was considerably below, probably $6 or $8 million below what Boras thought he was going to get. So I suppose it's a case of real negotiation.
And you think it's at least possible that Steven Strasburg could bring Major League Baseball back to Washington?
Real Major League Baseball, absolutely. The team is back, but real MLB baseball, maybe not yet.
Tom Boswell, thanks a lot for talking with us.
Thank you.
It's sports columnist Tom Boswell of the Washington Post.
On September 25, 2007, Michael Richard was executed in Texas for the rape and murder of Marguerite Dixon 21 years earlier. Now the highest-ranking Texas criminal judge is on trial. Judge Sharon Keller is charged with unethical conduct for improperly closing the court to Richard's last-minute appeal. Judge Keller began testifying in her own defense today. Chuck Lindell is covering Judge Keller's trial for the Austin American-Statesman. And Chuck, why don't we go back to the execution day in 2007. Explain for us, please, why there was this last-minute flurry of activity by Michael Richard's lawyers trying to stop his execution that day.
Well, that morning, unexpectedly, the U.S. Supreme Court said that it was going to accept a case deciding whether lethal injection was cruel and unusual punishment. So Michael Richard's lawyers thought that while this review was going on, stays would be issued in all executions, and they were trying to act on that.
So they were preparing briefs to file with Judge Keller?
With the Court of Criminal Appeals.
As the Texas Defender Service is trying to file these papers, the judge, in this case, Judge Keller, had gone home early, I guess, to meet an oven repairman. So a request comes in to her over the phone to keep the clerk's office open. What happened?
She said no. The clerk then relayed that no back to the lawyers for Michael Richard.
And what's standard operating procedure with the clerk's office? If there is a request for them to stay open late, what happens?
Well, what should have happened was, under the court's unwritten rules, they were unwritten at the time, the duty judge should have been called, the judge who was assigned to handle any last-minute communications on the Richard case.
Right, and this is Judge Cheryl Johnson, who's also testified at this trial of Judge Keller, saying she never got the request. And what did she tell the court?
Judge Johnson said that she should have been the one who was consulted about this request for late filing, and that she was critical of Judge Keller for not sending the request her way.
And she said, I would have granted more time.
She certainly would have.
We should explain that it was just hours after all of this back and forth that afternoon that Michael Richard was executed, that same night.
Yes, he was executed that night, the last person executed until the court finally ruled.
The U.S. Supreme Court.
Yes.
What is Judge Keller's defense here?
That she did not intend to close the court to a late filing, and in fact could not have. There is a rule of Texas appellate procedure that says that you can go to any judge and ask them to accept the filing, and Michael Richard's lawyers did not. So therefore, they're the ones who are derelict in their duties.
That they should have gone to another judge?
Yes.
Chuck, this trial is being held before a special master. These are charges filed by the State Commission on Judicial Conduct. What happens at the end here?
When this ends, we all go home and wait for the judge to issue his findings of fact, which will go to the State Commission on Judicial Conduct for their review, and the commission will decide one of three options: whether to dismiss the charges, whether to censure Judge Keller, or whether to recommend that she be removed from office. That would kick off a whole new trial before 7 appellate judges to decide whether that should happen or not.
I gather that the Texas Court of Appeals has now changed the way it handles business in these death penalty cases because of the uproar over this case of Michael Richard.
That's true. They now accept email filings on execution days when before they required everything on paper, and they put their execution day procedures in writing so everyone knows what's supposed to happen.
Yeah, that's really one of the stunning things here, is that before this, there was no written guidance. This was all implicit, I gather.
That is correct. And there was not only no written guidance, there was no set procedure to inform everyone on the court, the staff, what the procedures were.
For execution day appeals.
Correct.
Chuck Lindell, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Chuck Lindell is a reporter with the Austin American-Statesman.
Another death penalty case is the subject of Sonia Sotomayor's first vote as a Supreme Court justice. That story coming up in a moment on All Things Considered.
This is Walt Bodine. Our audience likes to stay informed, and we like to stay right with them. For example, here's our next show.
On the next Walt Bodine Show, we look to the skies to sort out science fact from science fiction. Join us for the Walt Bodine Show tomorrow morning at 10 on KCUR-FM. Support for All Things Considered comes from Kansas City Habitat Restore, partnering with Lowe's on Northwest Chipman Road in Lee's Summit to collect building material donations on the fourth Saturday of every month. Restore will be on site from 9 to 2. Details are online at restorekc.org. And Fisher & Phillips, LLP, a national labor and employment law firm that represents employers in Missouri, Kansas, and across the nation. Fisher & Phillips is on the web at laborlawyers.com. The time is 10 till 6, 77 degrees in Midtown Kansas City. Showers and thunderstorms are likely overnight tonight, continuing on Wednesday through Wednesday night. The low tonight 67, the high tomorrow 83. There is a flash flood watch in effect until Thursday morning.
This is All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Melissa Block.
And I'm Robert Siegel. Justice Sonia Sotomayor has cast her first vote on the Supreme Court. She voted last night in an Ohio death penalty case, joining the minority. NPR Legal Affairs correspondent Nina Totenberg has the story.
No member of the Supreme Court voted to review the death sentence imposed on Jason Getzey, the triggerman in an Ohio murder for hire. But 4 justices, including Sotomayor, voted to delay the execution in order to review a lower court decision that barred Getzey from challenging the state's lethal injection procedures. Sotomayor joined the court's 3 most liberal members in voting for the temporary delay, but they were outvoted by the court's 5-member conservative bloc, and today Getzey was executed in Ohio. Sotomayor did not participate in another death penalty decision handed down by the Supreme Court yesterday, this one from Georgia. Over the dissent of 2 justices, the court ordered a federal judge in Georgia to take testimony and rule on whether new evidence that could not have been obtained at trial clearly establishes that Troy Davis is innocent of the crime he was sentenced to die for. Davis, convicted of killing an off-duty police officer nearly 20 years ago, is currently on death row, having exhausted all his basic appeals. But as Justice John Paul Stevens observed in an opinion yesterday, 7 key trial witnesses have recanted or changed their trial testimony, and 3 other people have implicated the prosecution's principal witness as the real shooter. Dissenting from the court's decision ordering a hearing on the new evidence were Justices Antonin Scalia and Clarence Thomas. Said Scalia, Davis's claim is a sure loser that will serve no purpose except to delay the state's execution of its lawful criminal judgment. Scalia noted that the Supreme Court has never held that the Constitution forbids the execution of a person who's actually innocent if that person has had a fair trial. The court has in fact left that question unresolved. Nina Totenberg, NPR News, Washington.
Next week, Smithsonian Folkways is releasing a tribute to one of the most influential groups in American folk music, the New Lost City Ramblers. The release is a bittersweet event. It follows the death earlier this month of one of the group's founders, Mike Seeger. Keith Brand talked to Seeger just before he died and has this story on the Ramblers' legacy.
If you listened to the radio in 1958, you very likely heard this song.
Hang down your head, Tom, Julie, hang down your head and cry.
Tom Dooley was a breakout hit for the Kingston Trio, and they quickly became the face of the folk music revival. But at the same time, John Cohen, Tom Paley, and Mike Seeger developed a different sound.
Rock the train, Lucy, rock the train along, rock the train, Lucy, you keep the baby warm.
Mike Seeger grew up in one of the first families of folk music. His parents were well-known collectors, and his half-brother